In this last installment, we begin the movie with a cargo ship transporting apparently legal goods. Just a few hours before reaching its destination, two sailors of the crew, believing it to be alcoholic beverages, decide to steal part of the cargo. They enter one of the containers, and despite the suffocating chemical odor, they proceed to open one of the overturned barrels. Upon inhaling the toxic gases, they are poisoned within seconds and end up dying. On the other hand, in the command bridge, the rest of the crew detects the leak. They quickly put on their safety gear, and upon reaching the container, they find the bodies of their companions with clear chemical burns on their skin. Shortly after, to cover up the incident, the sailors decide to throw the corpses into the sea. Then we meet a man named Malcolm, who is stopped by an officer at customs. The agent orders him to get out of the vehicle to check his documents at the office, but Malcolm tries to persuade him to remain inside the vehicle. The officer, firm, tells him that the computer is in the office and that it is the only way to verify his information. In a desperate attempt not to separate from the vehicle, the young man starts the engine and steps on the accelerator to the maximum, unleashing an intense chase through the streets of the port in France. Meanwhile, we see our protagonist fishing quietly with his friend Tarconi. Suddenly, his day of fishing is interrupted by a call from the police department, informing him about the chase, anticipating that soon the situation will get complicated. At the airport terminal, we meet an influential businessman named Johnson, who in reality is a ruthless criminal who, under his impeccable legal facade, directs illicit operations for his own benefit, pretending to be a respectable businessman while planning and executing actions that guarantee him power and profits. His supposed reason for traveling is to attend an important meeting about the environment, although his true intentions are completely opposite, as he seeks to manipulate those involved and take advantage of any opportunity that favors his hidden interests. In Ukraine, a meeting will be held in which several businessmen will travel to discuss the minister's resolutions, because his decisions could affect their enormous profits. But the minister of Ukraine, firm and determined, makes it clear to the journalists that his priority is to reduce environmental impact and protect the well-being of his country, assuring that he will not allow large industries to continue polluting, which generates tension and discontent among the representatives of the powerful companies who see their interests and expectations threatened. As he sits in his office, he receives a call from Johnson, who watches him from a distance with binoculars. With a threatening tone, he tells him that he is a representative of the company Eco Corporations. He wants to discuss the issuance of business in Ukraine. The minister replies that he already had a meeting with another representative. He made it clear that he does not plan to do business with them. Johnson tells him to check the documents on his desk. When he sees them, he will change his mind. Vasilev proceeds to review them and comes across something unexpected. It is a photo of his kidnapped daughter. Returning to our protagonist, Frank rests quietly in his house, when suddenly, a vehicle crashes through the wall of his living room. It is Malcolm, the young man who had escaped from the police at customs. It turns out that he is an acquaintance of the veteran. Frank had recommended him in the past for a job as a transporter, something that enraged one of the thugs with whom he was negotiating, a muscular giant who, confident in his strength and underestimating Frank's abilities, decided to challenge his rules. He orders his men to surround him and places his hand on his jacket, giving him 10 seconds to reconsider his opinion. Demonstrating his martial arts skills, Martin manages to neutralize several with a single move, combining precise strikes that leave his opponents out of combat. Some he even breaks their legs to prevent them from getting back up. Finally, he faces the muscular giant, who, despite his strength and combat experience, cannot match Frank's technique, speed, and precision. Within seconds, the veteran takes him down and regains control of the situation, making it clear that no one can underestimate him. Returning to the present, the young man regains consciousness and begs his companion not to take him out of the vehicle. Convinced that it is nothing serious, the veteran quickly calls emergency services and reports the situation. The doctors arrive at the area and begin to take the young man out of the car. When they leave, Martin checks the interior and notices that there is a woman in the back. Just as he tries to help her, Valentina regains consciousness and shows him the bracelet on her wrist, warning him that if she moves away from the vehicle, they will explode into 1,000 pieces. Quickly, the veteran runs desperately to stop the doctors, but at that moment, his companion's bracelet explodes, reducing the bodies to ashes and leaving the remains of the vehicle in flames. Then Frank is knocked out by the same thug he had defeated in the past. After having a nightmare, Martin wakes up on a stretcher. He checks his arms and notices a bracelet on his right wrist. While dressing with his suit, Johnson appears and tells him that he asked his men to get his uniform. Frank replies that he only wears it when he works, and that now is not the time to do so. The muscular man tries to intervene, saying that they must punish him, but Johnson silences him immediately. Because of his arrogance, they are now in trouble. Johnson apologizes to Frank and explains that they spoke with a man he had recommended, but he turned out to be ineffective. Now they have unfinished business. He believes he is responsible for having recommended a man with little experience. The veteran responds that he understands, but makes it clear that he is not available to work as a transporter now. At that moment, the muscular man interrupts again, and without any scruples, Johnson shoots him in the head, making it clear to his soldiers that he will not tolerate stupid interruptions. Then he points at Frank and gives him 3 seconds to make a decision. Frank accepts the assignment, but with the condition that he will use his own vehicle. Johnson tells him to come along and points out that they know the way he operates in his jobs. That is why he decided to bring his vehicle to the garage. His men already took care of doing the proper maintenance. They installed a switch for the license plate, replaced the GPS, and reprogrammed it to be completely effective. His new assignment must be seen as a mission. As he approaches his vehicle, Frank notices that Valentina is in the passenger seat. So he speaks with Johnson, explaining that he does not like working with company. But when the mobster pulls out his gun and points it at the girl, Frank decides to make an exception. He gets in the vehicle and asks for information about the conditions of the assignment. Johnson explains that the bracelet has 3 levels. At 4 meters from the car, a yellow light will turn on. At 7 meters, it changes to orange, and at 20 meters, it turns red, a sign that it will be detonated if he keeps moving. The phone is programmed with his number, and he must call periodically to learn his new destination. On the other hand, the minister discreetly reports the kidnapping of his daughter, requesting help to find her without alerting the perpetrators, while the authorities ask him to buy time and not make hasty decisions that could put her in greater danger. Taking the agent's advice, the minister organizes a meeting with some representatives of the corporation. They inform him that there are 8 ships in total, and that the first one is already waiting at the port. They only need his signature to release the cargo. Vasilev explains that he must carefully review the documents and validate some technical and legal reports, which will take him about 24 hours before he can sign. Meanwhile, at the veteran's house, Tarconi and his men arrive at the perimeter to begin the investigation. Tarconi tells them to take the vehicle and look for any evidence that might help clarify the facts. A few meters before reaching the laboratory, the minister's private investigators intercept the truck. To leave no evidence, they eliminate the agent and take the GPS of the vehicle. To resolve his doubts, Frank asks Valentina for explanations. At first, she is reluctant and claims not to know anything, not even the name of the previous driver. However, after a few minutes of conversation, Frank begins to gain her trust, discovering that they have some tastes in common. When informed about the murder of the agent, Tarconi arrives at the area and reviews the recordings. He discovers that one of the subjects took the GPS from the vehicle, writes down the license plate, and contacts Interpol. Thanks to this, he manages to locate the killers, since one of the speed sensors captured a photo heading towards the main highway. Returning to our protagonist, Frank decides to divert from the road to visit one of his mechanic companions, a specialist in technological devices. Johnson finds out about the movement and orders his men to intercept him and force him back on route, but with the condition not to kill him, making sure he continues to be useful for their plans. Once with his companion, Frank shows him the bracelet. The mechanic is surprised to see it. Examining it closely, he points out that it is a form of binary magnetic resolution technology, something developed by the Pentagon. He explains that it is a kind of weapon based on magnetic attraction technology, an ultra-secret device that combines precision and destructive power, something that should never have fallen into civilian hands. While he checks the vehicle in search of the transmitter, the gang sent by Johnson bursts into the place, demanding that Frank return to the route immediately. The transporter remains silent, evaluating his opponents. One of the thugs, confident in his abilities, launches the attack without thinking, but Frank takes him down with a single move. The others surround him, but Frank remains calm and takes advantage of every opening, combining strikes, holds, and throws that neutralize several simultaneously. Meanwhile, Odo works focused on tracking the transmitter signal. At that moment, one of the thugs tries to surprise him, but Frank disarms him instantly and leaves him out of combat. Another giant tries to face him with brute strength, but Frank combines speed and technique, taking him down with a clean move. The last ones try to regroup and attack him from different angles. However, Frank anticipates every move, always staying one step ahead, proving that no one can beat him in hand-to-hand combat. Unexpectedly, a giant of more than 2 meters appears who throws him with force, knocking down a stone wall in the process. The veteran falls, but quickly gets up and connects a series of precise blows. The giant barely flinches, taking each impact as if nothing. Despite being thrown several times, the veteran continues attacking the Colossus's face, weakening him little by little. Finally, he takes advantage of a moment of carelessness and uses a shovel to deliver the final blow, knocking the giant out and proving once again that his technique, precision, and endurance surpass even the most imposing enemies. Returning to his companion, he informs him that he has finally located the bracelet transmitter, although he warns that disconnecting it correctly is completely beyond his knowledge. He will have to find someone more specialized to achieve it. While he changes and puts on a new suit, Valentina observes him in silence. Their eyes cross with a certain intensity. She cannot help but approach him with a mischievous smile. She congratulates him on his victory. The way he fought has left her surprised and impressed. As he resumes his route, Frank receives a call from Johnson himself, who threatens to send his most lethal men if he deviates again. However, Frank responds calmly, reminding him that he needs him alive, and that before continuing, he must clarify certain doubts face to face. The mobster, intrigued, agrees and sends him some coordinates, promising to arrive in a matter of minutes. When Frank arrives at the indicated place, he remains waiting. Suddenly, a nearby public phone begins to ring insistently. When he answers, he hears Johnson's voice, who tells him that he is disappointed, that he thought he was a true professional. He dismisses him and tells him that he will look for another person to take care of the job. Without Frank noticing, a man sent by the mafia takes advantage of that moment and sneaks into the vehicle, starting at full speed. Valentina, exhausted, sleeps deeply in the back seat, unaware of the danger. Frank reacts immediately, snatches a bicycle from a passerby, and begins a frantic chase, pedaling at high speed, dodging stalls and pedestrians, even entering through corridors and apartments, closing the distance with impressive skill. Meanwhile, Valentina wakes up startled and notices that the driver is not Frank. Without thinking, she throws herself at the man, forcing him to stop in a narrow passage. At that precise moment, Frank reaches the vehicle and, thanks to the distraction caused by her, manages to regain control of the wheel. Now safe, Frank decides to contact his friend Tarconi. When he answers, the inspector warns him in a serious tone to be careful. Some undercover agents took the GPS of the vehicle that crashed into his house. Most likely they're following him. All he knows is that they are driving a black Mercedes. Frank, direct as always, explains his current situation. He is carrying 2 packages in the trunk and as a passenger a Ukrainian woman named Valentina. Both have a bracelet with advanced technology. If they move more than 20 meters from the vehicle, they will explode into 1,000 pieces. Coming up with a plan in seconds, Frank asks Tarconi to intercept the signal of his calls. Pretending to accept a truce, he contacts the mobster, assuring him that he'll continue with the job. Without suspecting anything, Johnson shares new coordinates with him and informs him that he is about to complete the assignment. After hanging up, Tarconi confirms that he managed to intercept the signal and that in minutes he will be able to send him the address of the receiver. As they head to the new destination, Valentina, with a strange calm, begins to talk about her culinary tastes and confesses that she would like to have one last meal. Frank replies that she should be more optimistic, to which she pulls out 2 pills from her purse and, without thinking too much, takes them before he can stop her. Later, when stopping at a gas station, Valentina gets out to go to the bathroom. Under the effect of the pills, she starts dancing inside the store, trying products and behaving unpredictably. When she tries to enter the bathroom, she realizes that the bracelet is about to cross the 3rd distance level, so with no other option, she decides to urinate in the middle of the store. At that moment, Frank detects a black Mercedes parking a few meters away. Valentina returns and Martin orders her to get back to the car immediately, but she, upset, start screaming like crazy, drawing the attention of the occupants of the vehicle, who turn out to be the undercover agents, who quickly identify her. Frank has no other choice. He takes her by force and speeds away, surpassing 180 kilometers per hour. Thinking they are Johnson's men, he decides to call him to confront him. However, the mobster assures him that they are not his men and promises to investigate the perpetrators. Within seconds, the chase intensifies as usual. Frank shows his skill at the wheel, dodging vehicles, maneuvering brutally, and in a risky move, he manages to pass between two trucks driving on two wheels. Leaving the main road, they enter a wooded area, where the agents draw their weapons and try to stop him by shooting at the vehicle. The transporter, with his steel reflexes, causes them to lose control and fall down a cliff at full speed, thus ensuring their definitive elimination. After this intense chase, our protagonist decides to stop to catch some air. Valentina approaches and begins to massage him to relieve his stress. Frank asks her to stop, to which she comments that she wants to have sex before dying. Frank gets out of the vehicle and tells her it is not the time. He checks the trunk and is about to break one of his sacred rules. Thanks to this, he discovers that the real package is Valentina. In the bags, there is nothing but phone directories. Valentina tells him that she knew, but that she did not say anything because it did not matter. Valentina walks away slowly with the car keys, while confessing that she got too excited when she saw him fighting shirtless. Frank tells her that he was only trying to prevent them from being killed. He asks her to hand over the keys and she promises that she will return them, but first he must play with her in a wild way. The veteran takes off his clothes and Valentina begins to kiss him passionately. On the other hand, Johnson decides to call the minister to complain about the undercover agents. If he tries again, he will have no choice but to kill his daughter. Vasilev makes it clear that he knows his name. If he dares to touch Valentina, he will use all his power to take revenge. After making love in the mountains, Valentina tells him that she was in Ibiza on vacation. A strange man invited her for a drink. She took it without thinking and began to lose consciousness. She went to the bathroom and some men appeared. When she woke up, she was in a vehicle. She asked the driver for an explanation and he assured her that he was simply a transporter. He was very skilled at driving. She told him that her father was a very powerful man with great influence. In the end, she convinced him to let her use a public phone. Before she could share her location with her father, some men began chasing them and they managed to escape with some injuries. She told him she would ask an old acquaintance for help, and they ended up destroying the wall of his house. From the moment she saw him, he caught her attention. She knew that being by his side, everything would get better. Back on the road, Johnson calls him and informs him that the plans have changed, giving him a new location and asking him to stay out of it. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Tarkoni manages to get the minister to contact the mobster. The goal is simple: track the call and locate him precisely. After obtaining the exact location, the inspector calls Frank again and reveals Johnson's true objective. EcoCorp is pressuring the minister to sign an agreement that would allow the entry of a ship loaded with toxic waste into Ukraine. It is not just one. There are 8 more waiting for authorization. To guarantee the signature, they kidnapped his daughter and are holding her hostage. Hearing this, Frank realizes that the entire assignment, the bracelet, and the threats were part of a much larger operation. If the minister gives in, the country will become a dumping ground for chemical waste in exchange for his daughter's life. Noticing his voice a little strange, Tarkoni pauses and comments that he seems to have created a bond with Valentina, although Frank has always been a reserved man, with strict rules and no room for distractions. Tarkoni reminds him that deep down he is still a romantic man. Frank remains silent for a few seconds, gripping the wheel, as if he did not want to admit it, but his gaze toward Valentina reveals more than any words. At that moment, the mobster calls him and orders him to stop on the bridge. His mission has come to an end. Suddenly, several vehicles block the road from both sides. Among them appears Johnson, who communicates again to congratulate him for keeping his word. He must tell Valentina to get out immediately. She refuses, overwhelmed by fear. Knowing that as soon as she leaves, Martin will be exposed to the mafia, the transporter assures her firmly that he will find a way to escape, that this is not the first time he has been presumed dead. He tries to calm her and promises that when all this is over they will meet for dinner together. Valentina, with tears in her eyes, kisses him one last time before walking toward the mobsters. Johnson removes the bracelet with a special key. But she, filled with rage, spits in his face, so the criminal responds with a brutal blow to her abdomen, then grabs her by the hair and orders his men to gun down the transporter. To save himself, he steps on the accelerator and drives the vehicle into the river. While sinking, he manages to call Tarconi and send him his location, although he knows it will take at least 10 minutes for him to arrive. With no other option, he is forced to improvise. He checks the trunk and finds 2 emergency rafts, fills them with the air from the tires, and against all odds manages to make the vehicle float, escaping at the last second. Before contacting the minister again, the criminal sees a train bound for Odessa. In the call, they connect the minister with his daughter, forcing her to beg for her life. He has 15 minutes to comply with their demands, or he will never see her again. Meanwhile, after managing to repair his vehicle with the help of some agents, Tarconi explains the magnitude of the threat. If the ships unload all the waste, pollution will cover half the country for a full century. Then he reveals the exact location of the mobster. Without hesitation, the transporter grips the wheel with fury and accelerates at full speed, determined to save Valentina at any cost. At the same time, in the ministry hall, the atmosphere is suffocating. The EcoCorp representatives insist that the signature must be made immediately, assuring that everything is for the sake of progress. The minister, with sweat on his forehead and his eyes fixed on the document, struggles between saving his daughter or condemning his country, pretending not to understand some points of the document. Vasilev intervenes with cunning, questioning details and stretching out each clause to gain as much time as possible. After speeding down the road at maximum velocity, Frank manages to catch up with the train. He advances a few meters and waits patiently in the exact spot until the train appears on the horizon. At the precise moment, he accelerates and jumps onto the roof of the train. Entering through one of the windows, the mobsters, completely surprised, fire wildly, missing every shot. Frank moves with calculated precision, using every object and every corner of the carriage to his advantage. With quick strikes and strategic movements, he neutralizes the criminals, even using their own bodies as shields and taking them down with their own weapons. Johnson, desperate, takes Valentina hostage, but she refuses to be intimidated, bites his arm, and manages to lock herself inside one of the carriages. When the mobster finally opens the door, Frank appears before him, paralyzing his attack. Luckily for the mobster, the bracelet begins to beep. If Frank keeps advancing, it will explode. With no other option, he quickly retreats to bring his vehicle closer. For his part, the mobster prepares to separate the carriages, but the transporter steps hard on the accelerator and jumps onto the carriage, subduing him with precise blows. In an unexpected move, Johnson pulls out a knife, but Frank knocks him down with a kick, beats him up, and takes the bracelet key, then places the bracelet on the mobster, ties his arm with the seatbelt, and puts the vehicle in reverse. Johnson manages to free himself just as the vehicle pulls away, but the bracelet explodes into 1,000 pieces after exceeding the 20-meter limit. The police arrive at the scene as Frank approaches Valentina. With tears in her eyes and heavy breathing, she thanks him for saving her life, confessing that she thought everything was lost. While they receive assistance, Tarconi calls the minister to inform him that his daughter is safe. With a smile on his face, the minister tears up the document in front of the EcoCorp representatives. Before leaving, he comments that he has a pending conference in which he will warn about the risks of doing business with corrupt and dangerous people like them. In parallel, a special unit intercepts the ships with toxic waste, ensuring that the cargo never reaches the coast. With their intervention, they prevent an ecological disaster that would have scarred the country for generations. In the last scenes, we see the friends resuming their vacation day. Enjoying fishing by the river, Tarconi, with nostalgia, comments that when he was a child, he used to come fishing with his father in that same place. Although now everything has changed, Frank points out that he is right, to which Tarconi adds that people also change too much over time. At that moment, Valentina wakes up and interrupts them with a big smile. With Valentina suggesting a new plan, we bring to an end the complete saga of the original Transporter trilogy.